When the church in the first several centuries, when the church was so aggressive and dynamically, well, they were being martyred right and left and persecuted, and the church was thriving. In America, comfort is one of our worst enemies. Welcome to the Built for War podcast. I'm Jimmy Evans. So good to have you. This is a brand new podcast that we're doing, and the purpose of this is to encourage leaders, leaders in the church, leaders in the kingdom, and to equip you to succeed in whatever level of leadership that you're in. But Built for War comes from a teaching that I've done for many years at leadership conferences and to leaders. And it's talking about how the church is, losing. We're losing the war. And part of the reason we're losing the war is we've forgotten our identity. And every time that Jesus referred to the church, he referred to it in the context of war. An example is in Matthew 16, which was the first mention of the church. He said, you're my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against you. In other words, he's talking about, you're the church, and you're going to be in a war with hell. When Jesus sent out the first mission in the church in Luke chapter 10, the 70 went out. It wasn't the 12 disciples, it was the 70. He said, I saw Satan, when you were out ministering, I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning, and I give you authority over serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means harm you. When talking about John the Baptist, who was the first man in the New Testament, he says, since the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. See, we're built for war. The church is a gate-taking, invasive force. That's who we are. But the church, we've forgotten our identity, and we're getting our clocks cleaned. And the churches that are succeeding and the churches that are thriving are the aggressive churches, the churches that are attacking the gates of hell. And we're going to talk about that on this program because it's a very practical thing. When you learn, how to be the church and who we really are, you can succeed in every single thing you do. Now, in these podcasts, I'm joined now by a couple of my closest friends, pastors, veteran pastors who've been pastoring large churches for a long time. We're talking about stuff that matters. We're not talking about pie in the sky kind of stuff. In some of the podcasts that are coming up, we're talking about fear. We're talking about betrayal. We're talking about marriage and family issues. We're talking about homosexuality and the woke issues and all those things like that. These are things that we need to talk about as leaders, and you need to hear leaders talking about to kind of help you formulate what you're going through, but also personally to help you deal with some of the personal issues. And this is not religious talk. If you want religious talk, you need to go somewhere else. This is going to be real talk from men that have been through a lot. And I've been in ministry for 41 years, and I pastored Trinity Fellowship in Amarillo for 30 years. And when I started pastoring it was about 900 people. It grew to over 10,000 people. And it wasn't all pretty. I can tell you that right now. There was a lot in there. We grew, and we saw a lot of tremendous things happen, and the church is still thriving today. But there was a lot in there that we had to endure, a lot of attacks that were in there. So we're going to be talking about those kinds of things. And so I hope that this is something that interests you. You'll tell your friends about too, because people in the church world, this is what we need. We need to be able to be ministered to personally, but also to be able to talk about issues that are going on and how to address those issues. Well, I'm joined today by two of my closest friends. One is Pastor Jimmy Witcher, sitting to my immediate left, on your right. He's the senior pastor of Trinity Fellowship Church in Amarillo, Texas. Now, this is my successor. He's the one who took over after me. You're welcome.
Thank you, Pastor. I appreciate it very much.
So he had to endure a lot just having to come behind me.
That's not true, but it's been awesome.
But Trinity is thriving.
Yes, sir.
It is a thriving. And now when we're saying this, I know some of you may be out there saying, well, I don't want to hear about how great your church and all this stuff. Believe me, we all go through stuff, and we're going to talk about it on this program. Jimmy came behind me. Jimmy's background was business. He was an elder in the church. And how long were you an elder before you became pastor?
I think I was an elder for over 15 years before I came on staff.
Yeah, and so Jimmy was the COO of two very large companies, and he built those companies up, and they sold. And so the second one I think sold for $100 million or something like that, Merrick or something like that. Yeah,
exactly.
Was it more than that?
Well, yeah, it was a lot.
It was a lot. So
it was very successful.
So it was very successful. But Jimmy came into on Trinity to take my place, and your gift is leadership, Jimmy. I mean, you're a gifted leader.
Thank you, Pastor. Well, it's been great. It's such an honor to be here with you, and it's such a timely topic. And I don't know of anybody better, really, in the country than you to be addressing this topic, because you really have been through so many different journeys and helped so many pastors all over the country. And so thank you for doing this. This is a big deal.
You're welcome. Well, at some point we'll talk about transition, but I hope every pastor has someone like Jimmy Witcher who he treats me like gold. I mean, the way you've treated me, Jimmy, I mean, it's a testament to you, but also to other situations out there where there's transitions of how to treat the old guy. And,
well, you're very much worth it.
And Lee Cummings, my dear friend, and Lee and I have been friends for Radiant's 27 years old.
Yeah, 27. I've known you for 28 years.
28 years. And senior pastor, Radiant Church in Kalamazoo, Michigan, phenomenal church. And we're going to be there in a few weeks with EXO. Yeah. Phenomenal church. It's just a thriving church. And you are a gifted leader, also gifted. Both of you are gifted preachers. But you have done in a community of, I don't know how many people are in your community. I mean, you're
about 300,000 people in our county.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your church is huge. Mm-hmm. But I'm thankful that you're here, Lee, because you have so much. You're kind of a theologian. You have a theological background.
Some would call me a heretic. Others call me a theologian. But
I mean, you're a good theologian.
Thank you.
Well, some of the first conversations we ever had, I remember we were talking theology and stuff like that. Yeah. But you come from that kind of a background. And you started, now you were with Res Life in Grand Rapids, Michigan, when we met.
Yeah.
And you were what, youth pastor, college pastor?
Yeah, I was one of the teachers in the Bible school, taught on Wednesday nights, also helped oversee young adults type of thing when we were sent out. I was 25 when we were sent and launched Radiant Church in Kalamazoo.
And so that's 27 years old.
27 years ago, this September.
Mm. Yeah, I was at your 25th anniversary a couple of years ago. But I'm a senior elder. I'm the senior elder at Trinity, and I'm on the board of Lee's church, and so we're very close. We've known each other forever, and I wanted these men to join us, and they'll be with us now every podcast, and we're going to be discussing issues. They also, both of them, have very large church networks. There's Trinity Fellowship Association of Churches, Radiant Association of Churches.
Yep, Radiant Network.
Radiant Network. And both with a lot of churches, a lot of, every size church. But their passion is, and our passion is, to help churches thrive. And when you come alongside churches, I mean, it's such a blessing to the churches and the pastors, because they get answers. You guys have roundtables, for pastors to come together and talk through all their problems and things like that. When they're going through stuff, they can call you. Two very, very healthy churches, two great networks to join if you're not connected somewhere. And I know we have people watching right now and listening to this, and you're senior pastors, you're associate pastor, you're worship leader, you're over the small groups, you're over the volunteers, or you are a volunteer at church or something like that. This is for everybody, and we're going to be addressing a lot of different topics. In this podcast today, I'm going to tell a story and then let these guys go. We were broke when I became pastor of the church. We were packed. We were in a tiny building. We were landlocked. The fire marshal warned us monthly that he was going to shut us down because someone had remodeled the building without a building permit. And they hated us. Our people were parking in the neighbors' driveways and stuff every weekend. So the neighborhood hated us, and the fire marshal was warning us. I had a knot in my stomach. I mean, it was just a knot. I didn't know what to do. We didn't have money. We couldn't even solve our problems internally. Mm-hmm. So I was praying one day, and I was just really kind of at my wit's end. And the Lord said, turn to Isaiah 58. And I turned to Isaiah 58, and it's talking about the fast the Lord desires. The Jewish people were mistreating each other. And the Lord was saying, don't come to me fasting and trying to get my attention while you're, driving these people hard and you're so cruel to your own people. And he said, here's the fast that I desire, to divide your bread with the hungry, to clothe the naked, to undo the band of the yoke and take off the oppression off the people around you. And he says, and if you'll do that, and there are 10 promises there, your light will break forth. You'll be like a well-watered garden. You'll be like an oasis in the desert. Your healing will speedily spring forth. There's 10 promises there. And so the Lord said to me, I want you to start a mercy ministry. And if you'll do that, if you'll reach out to the hurting people in your community, then I'll give you all 10 of those promises there. So we went to the indigent part of town, and we rented the front third of a casket company. It was the Texas Coffin Company, and we rented the front third of it, and we had to bring it up to code to be able to open it up to give away clothes and food and things like that. And the mission of Bethesda is called Bethesda Outreach Center. Bethesda means House of Mercy. The mission was to dignify the poor. That's the Lord said, don't you put a bunch of stuff in a dirty warehouse with a guy with a bad attitude handing it out. When people walk in this door, I want them to know how special they are. And I said to the people in our church, I said, we need clothes. And I said, don't give us your old clothes. Don't give us your bad clothes. If you won't wear it, don't give it to us. We had to tell people to stop bringing clothes. And our clothing area of Bethesda looks like a department store to this day. And we gave away food. We did all kinds of stuff. So we had to have $50,000 to remodel Bethesda, and no bank in town. We only had one bank that would talk to us. And they said, yeah, we'll loan you $50,000 if all your elders personally guarantee it, because we didn't have any money. So the elders personally guaranteed it. We borrowed $50,000. We opened. We didn't have any high donors in our church. I mean, we had a lot of people, but they didn't give. And so we opened Bethesda. The day we opened it, we got a check for $10,000. We had never had a check for $10,000. Okay, so we opened Bethesda. First of all, we opened Bethesda, and I thought to myself, I don't know if anybody's going to show up. Well, they've been beating the door down for 35 years or however long it's been out there. I mean, I was shocked at how many indigent people there were that needed help. And so when we opened the door of Bethesda, the 10 promises of Isaiah 58, God did every single one of them. We were able to purchase land and build a new building and move from that building. If you could see the building we were in, you wouldn't believe it. It was so bad. And the building that we have today, how many square feet do we have at Trinity?
I think about 260,000, something like that.
On just in that campus.
In that one building.
And we have many other campuses. And so one of the gates of hell is poverty.
Yeah.
We're sitting right now in the XO marriage building, which started from Trinity. The Lord birthed, from a local church, the Lord birthed the largest marriage ministry in the world from Trinity Fellowship. And Trinity Fellowship still supports us and really supports us. And one of the gates is divorce. One of the gates. See, Jesus said, you're my church, and the gates of hell cannot prevail against you. What that means is a gate is a stationary force. A gate is something designed to keep some people in and some people out. Well, in this case, it's designed to keep us out and hurting people and people in poverty and drug addicts and all these people in. And Jesus is effectively saying, pick your gate. It can't stand against you, whatever you decide to do. So in other words, the church right now is designed for spaghetti suppers. We're designed for socials. In other words, we're such a wimpy force. And they talk about the church isn't relevant. We're not relevant. If you're not dealing with the gates of hell in your city, you're not relevant.
Yeah.
What we got so much respect when we opened Bethesda Outreach Center, because we got so much respect in our city. Other churches sent their people to Bethesda. The city itself began to look at us. See, Jimmy Witcher had I want you to tell about the conversation you had with the mayor of Amarillo. Now we're talking about being a relevant force, attacking the gates of hell in your city, which means helping hurting people that hell is trying to keep behind those gates. And so we went to Amarillo, to the indigent part of Amarillo. You've now opened more facilities that you're helping the community of
the refugees there.
The refugee community. So talk about the conversation, Jimmy, you had with the mayor of Amarillo when you were asking what you could do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to share that. But I do want to kind of just highlight one thing.
Yeah.
Because I think where you're going, I love this story, and I love the legacy that you and the elders laid in front of us in going out and having the faith to go and go forward with Bethesda. But what I hear you saying is there's no such thing as a defensive church.
That's right.
There's no such thing as playing defense. We have to always be on offense.
Yeah.
And I would say this to even just to encourage some pastors, coming out of COVID, coming out of this season of, wondering if we're going to survive and how we're going to get through it. And then all the other factors, what the enemy wants to do is put us in a defensive position.
That's right.
And think about, well, how can I grow? How do I expand? How do I help my congregation? And we should think about those things. But what you're saying is, I think is so true, is the moment we quit being offensive, there's some sort of an anointing we lose in that.
That's right.
And the Lord will guide us until we get to go and become offensive. And then as we become offensive, that's when the blessing comes and the fulfillment comes.
When the 70 went out,
that's right.
When they were going out, Jesus said, I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning. Now, some people think that that's referring to eternities past. I don't.
I don't either.
I believe when we're ministering to hurting people, we're displacing demonic authorities in our communities.
I agree.
And so when we're ministering to poverty, to drugs, to divorce, to whatever, to sickness, whatever it might be, but we are designed to be a gate taking a pervasive force, and we should be the government's best friend as it relates to we can solve problems they can't solve.
Yeah. The church is meant to be a movement. It's not meant to be a monument.
That's right.
When you talk about the gates of hell, that's stationary. That's the enemy trying to keep territory. Right. But he can only keep territory that we cede.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
And so, the church is meant to be an offensive movement, moving in the direction, taking back territory. Darkness isn't a force. We oftentimes talk about in the world all the woke stuff and different things, different challenges that culture seems to be magnifying right now. But that's just darkness. The Bible describes it as darkness. But darkness is not a force. Light is. Mm-hmm. And darkness can only exist in the corners where light refuses to go.
Wow.
And so as long as the church refuses to be who we're called to be, which is to be the light and to be the salt, darkness will win. But as soon as the church begins to move in the direction of where darkness has been camped out at, it has to be dispelled.
I love it.
That's exactly right.
And a lot of what's happening right now is that darkness, Lee, is so pervasive and it's so oppressive and threatening.
Yeah.
If
it's intimidating.
You better not speak up. Well, it's the opposite. Rather than being intimidated by it, we should intimidate it.
It's true.
You talk back to me, we'll come over there and we'll tear your gates off. Mm-hmm. And so there's nothing, the power of Jesus Christ, what Jesus is saying, here's my church, those gates, the gates of hell themselves, they cannot stand against you.
Yeah.
And so when the church in the first several centuries, when the church was so aggressive and dynamically, they were being martyred right and left and persecuted, and the church was thriving. In America, comfort is one of our worst enemies.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was in the, I'm sorry, I jumped in on your story, Jimmy.
No,
this
you're
is
good.
how we're going to do
this
things.
This is awesome,
I
Lee. I love it.
Hey, when you really take a look at the early church that was persecuted, it wasn't their physical violence that intimidated the Roman emperor and all of his armies and his power and his control center. It was the fact that they loved their lives.
That's right.
They did not love their lives even to the point of death. They believed in something so strongly they were willing to die for it. Yeah. And that did not compute with the culture around them. Yeah. And I think a church that is afraid it's a dial tone to culture. But when the church is unintimidated, unafraid, I think it was A.W. Tozer who said that what a scared world needs is a fearless church.
That's right.
And that's what we need in this day and age.
Well, we don't have it. Yeah. And there are fearless pastors. Both of you guys are fearless preachers. And, we were talking about Ed Young earlier, and who's my dear friend. And we go to fellowship quite a bit. And I speak there. He's a fearless preacher. He'll preach on anything. But he said this to his congregation, so I'll share it. But Ed was at a pastor's conference, and he was coming home to preach on an anti-woke series. And he was at this pastor's conference. He said he was in the room with about 40 pastors, and everybody was talking about, what do you preach now? And they said, Ed, what do you preach? He said, well, actually, I'm going to go home and I'm preaching the series on anti-woke. And they said, 40 pastors said, don't do that. Don't do that.
Huh.
I mean, and he did such a great job. I was so proud of him. And when he started his series, he said, well, they warned me that I would lose church members. He said, I've been losing church members for 35 years. If some of you guys want to leave, go ahead and leave. And he preached this great anti-woke, and you preached it too, Jim, the anti-woke series. But tell your story about the mayor.
Yeah. So when I first came on as an executive pastor, I was trying to figure out what did our community need. You know, we were still doing Bethesda. We still do Bethesda to this day, still in the old Texas Coffin Company, though we own it now instead of having to lease it.
We own it.
I think we do about 350,000 meals a year and still serve out of that community very well. But I just went to the mayor just to say, what does our community need? What's missing and what can we do as a church? And he was, first of all, shocked because he'd never had a pastor come ask him, you know, what can we do? And then he said, you know, where we're struggling is with the refugee community. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, in Northeast Amarillo, we have a community. It's East Ridge Elementary School, and it's the largest school in our entire region, not just high school. It's the largest school. And there's 23 or 27, I can't remember, different dialects that are spoken in that one school.
Wow.
Because that's where all of the refugees from Amarillo are all that come in, and we get just tons of refugees
Catholic
every single
Family
year.
Services brings refugees to Amarillo from all over the world.
All over the world. I mean, 20-something different countries, from the Middle East to Asia, Africa. I mean, just unbelievable, the amalgamation of people that come in. And so this school is just overrun. I mean, not only, you know, we talk about ESL. I mean, they don't even think about English because they have so many different languages, and there's parents that don't know how to fill out forms and all those things. So we just kind of said, okay, how can we help that school? How can we help them? So we befriended the principal there and set up, and it turns out it's like a mile and a half from our Bethesda Outreach Center.
Right.
I mean, it's right in the same neighborhood. And so we've just been able to partner with that school. In fact, we just the beginning of school this year, we were able to do a backpack drive. I think we had 550 backpacks or something, and we gave out a backpack to every student that wanted one. You know, free haircuts for everybody that wanted to get back in school. But it's just been an incredible opportunity. You know, people talk about we got to go to the nations. I mean, we got 27 different languages right here in our backyard.
Well,
we can go to the nations right
here.
here.
If you haven't reached your community, stop talking about the nations.
That's right.
Why give away across the world once you're not giving away out your back door? It drives me crazy. But in Amarillo, I mean, there is not a larger mercy ministry in that area than Bethesda.
Not that I know of.
Yeah. So it's a great example. Well, the courage that is necessary in these days is more than 20 or 30 years ago, because there's not a church on every corner now. A lot of churches are shutting down and becoming nightclubs or something else. There's a lot of resistance. I noticed that there was a farmer in California that just won a lawsuit because they wouldn't let him into the farmer's market. I think it was California, because he didn't agree with gay marriage. And for 6 years.
Unbelievable.
He's been fighting the law for 6 years to get in the farmer's market, and they wouldn't let him in. Well, that ultimately is the Antichrist system.
That's right.
You know, there's going to, ultimately, when the Antichrist comes to power, there's going to be a system where you can't buy or sell unless you conform. See, Revelation 13 talks about the mark of the beast, and you can't buy or sell without it. Revelation 14 says, if anyone takes this mark, you will never be forgiven. You'll burn in hell forever. So it's not just a financial instrument. It is a moral. Bowing.
Right.
I'm saying I agree with woke. I agree with all this stuff you agree with. You have to remember the Antichrist is the lawless one. He's antinomian. He doesn't believe the word. So the word is absolutely under attack. But Paul tells us, preach the word. Preach the word. Well, a lot of times preaching the word means feeding and encouraging and things like that. Sometimes preaching the word means standing up and talking about very difficult issues that some people don't want to hear about. And so you have to preach it, right?
That's absolutely right. And I live, you know, I don't live in Texas. I live in the People's Socialist Republic of Michigan.
You can come on down anytime you want, brother.
So I enjoy every time I come down here and get a little breather. But, you know, we've seen these policies put into place in our state, as a lot of states have seen that. And, you know, it used to be you thought, well, if you stay out of the cities, and if you just kind of stay in the small suburbs, then your kids will be safe. You won't have to deal with these issues. But the reality is now it's statewide education in the state of Michigan. Those standards apply to all school districts to be able to teach on gender identity, gender affirming. We're abortion up to the last day of pregnancy or gender affirming state.
Lee, talk about the law they're about to pass.
They're about to pass. Well, two main laws in the state of Michigan that have recently are on the forefront. And it's interesting, elections really do have ramifications. So our governor was reelected, but then in addition to that, she claimed both the Senate and the House, and the Supreme Court flipped in the state of Michigan, so it's got a liberal advantage. And our Attorney General is an LGBTQ activist. And so they have made it their agenda to make Michigan the most LGBTQ plus and whatever other alphabet soup you want to add onto there, affirming state in the union. And so because of that, two laws that are on the forefront. One is called the Elliott-Larsen Law, and it adds to the existing civil rights law. Our Supreme Court just affirmed that, you know how it used to say you can't discriminate in hiring based on religious faith or on sex. Well, now they've reinterpreted sex to mean gender presentation, sexual orientation, and there is no religious exemption to that. So it used to be churches or religious institutions were protected from that, but now there's not even that safeguard anymore. So now there are at least two cases that are right now being pursued in the state of Michigan against a Christian college, I believe, and a Christian school. The second law, and this is even more extreme, is basically it's a law that makes misgendering somebody a felony in the state of Michigan. So if somebody, the way the law reads is if somebody feels intimidated or threatened because you refuse to use their preferred pronouns according to their gender identity, then that is a felony, and it can be subject to $10,000 fine, jail time, and being forced to go to a re-education camp.
There you go.
So that's about ready to be, it hasn't been yet, but it's about to be signed into the law. And so, you know, we're living in that type of a climate, and it's not just in the cities, it's It's in the small towns and the small schools. My executive pastor just stood up in front of his school board, and basically there's books in the libraries, and they've got an issue with trans kids wanting to use the opposite bathrooms, and you know the parents are up in arms, but it's mandated now. And so as leaders, as pastors, to not talk about these issues is negligence.
Absolutely.
It is negligence of the sheep.
You're not equipping the people to deal with what's happening right now. And what happens is they become intimidated.
Yeah,
that's right.
And they just end up complying to what's going on because their pastor and their leaders don't have enough courage.
Well, if it was important, our pastor would talk about it, right?
That's exactly right.
And I work, you know, parents are like, I work 40, 50 hours a week. I come home trying to just put food on the kids. I don't have time to research this. I don't have time to dig. I'm just trying to survive. And if we don't talk about it, then all they get is what the kids are getting at school or what they're watching on media.
Well, I had on my program, on my podcast recently, the Tipping Point podcast, I had Yaku Boyens, and he deals with sex trafficking. It's 90. So he was talking about the movie Taken. And he said 1% of sex trafficking is kidnapping. They don't do that. They're at home. The kids that are being trafficked are mostly still at home. And his sister was sex trafficked for 6 years. And that's how he got into this. And they're on social media, and the groomers, they have groomers. And the groomers are going online, and they're masters at manipulating these kids. And they're sitting there. Their parents aren't paying attention to them, or their parents aren't paying close enough attention to them. But most of the trafficking is someone within their familial environment. Wow. Someone that they know. The person that trafficked his sister was one of their family's best friends. And so they come in, and what he was saying is, if there's ever been a time that parents need to be vigilant, it's right now.
That's right.
And if there's ever been a time the church, and so he told the story, and Jimmy and I talked about this. He told a story about Upper Room Church in Dallas, a great church, and that's where Yaku and his family go. And so they said, would you come in and train our people? And he will. Just look it up, Yaku Boyens Ministry, JACOBOOYEN. Great guy, great ministry. But they equip parents and they equip churches. They have a tremendous amount of information on their website. So Upper Room Church called him and said, would you come in and train us in the sex trafficking and all that? Sure. So he went in and trained him on a Monday. Wednesday night, they called him and they said, we've got something happening up here if you can come up.
It was that close?
2 days.
Yeah, I was there that weekend that happened.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you spoke for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so on Wednesday night, they called him. He said 25 minutes later, I walked in. They had a young man standing in the middle of the room with his hands up worshiping, praying for people. People were praying for him. He was a groomer. And he was acting like a groomer, and so that's why they called. So Yaku walks up to him and just starts talking to him, asking him questions. Well, so the kid gets nervous because he knows this guy's onto me. So the kid, texts, and he walks out the front door of the church, and he followed him. Yaku followed him out there. The door opens. The number one sex groomer, the number one sex trafficker in the state of Texas is sitting in the car, waiting for this kid at a church. And he starts getting in the car, and Yaku said, "You don't have to get in that car, And the kid turns and said, "No, I've got to go." So he gets in the car. And so what he was saying is, in church youth groups, kids they're infiltrating church youth groups. So and again, every pastor, every parent, you can't play dumb anymore.
That's right.
The world is just too dangerous, and they're coming into these kids in their homes. They're not taking them out of the homes.
Yeah.
In the homes. So I told him a story about a girl we had at Trinity in Amarillo, and it was one of our female pastors was talking to this girl after church and praying with her, and she said, this girl, probably in her late teens, she said, what do you do for a living? Or what do you do? And she said, I'm a prostitute. And she said, you're a prostitute? Why do you do that? She said, well, I don't have a choice. And so she said this guy came in, she was working in a restaurant, this guy came in all the time, they kind of hit off a friendship, started going out a little bit, eating lunches and stuff like that. And then finally she took him home. And the guy met her mother and little brother and got close to them. And this took place they'll take 8 to 9 months to groom somebody. Mm-hmm. So after about 9 months, they went out to eat lunch one day, and this guy said to her, he said, now I'm going to say something to you, and you're going to do everything I tell you to do from this point forward. And she said, what? And he said, I'm going to have you have sex with men. And the first time you don't, your little brother and mother die. And so I said that to Yaku. He was on my podcast. And Yaku said, that is exactly what happened to my sister. That she won a national singing competition. And the guy that was grooming her was a guy that she trusted, that was in the music industry there. And he said to her, he actually raped her one day, and he said, you're going to be having sex with me and all these other men, and the first time you don't, I'm going to kill your brother and your mother. And so what you don't realize, what these girls don't realize is they have all the power. Mm-hmm. If they're found out, they're not going to get in trouble. This guy's going to go to prison. Mm-hmm. But there's so much manipulation and intimidation there, but it's pervasive. And so he said, in any zip code in America, including Highland Park in Dallas, Texas, any zip code in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, this is going on all the time. I can't remember, I think it's a $150 billion a year industry.
Yeah, it's huge.
And so it's massive. And the church, by and large, is just completely ignorant of it. And I was too for a long time. Mm-hmm. But we have to be talking about things that matter. Yeah. We have to be able to war spiritually. This podcast is built for war. We have to get a war mentality, not toward people that we're trying to reach, but toward the enemy that is unashamed in his desire to destroy people's lives.
Well, the thing that's changed over the last 20 years is this.
Oh, yes, that's right.
This is, in many homes, I don't know how many smartphones are now in existence, but the average number of 11, 12, 13-year-old kids that have smartphones is astronomical.
It's the vast majority.
And having one of these in the hands of your kids, this might be controversial, but to have this in the hands of your kids unchecked is like going to bed every single night with your front door wide open.
That's right.
And a sign that says predators welcome, because that's where they're reaching our kids. And so if we're approaching doing ministry, and it's not just kids, it's everybody that has one of these things. The world has changed since 2006 when the first iPhone came out. The world has radically changed. And if we're still approaching how we're discipling people in our church based on a pre-smartphone culture, then we're in real trouble.
The average age of exposure of children to pornography is 8 years old. Because if one child has a smartphone, every child in that other child, because it just takes one bad parent to give an 8-year-old a smartphone, and all of a sudden all their friends are seeing all this pornography and things like that. And that's shocking. And by the way, there are about 8 billion people in the world. 6.75 billion have a smartphone. Not a phone, a smartphone.
It's unbelievable.
And you take it with the children away, that's every adult. Every teenager has a smartphone, and you can get to anything. You can use a Bible app to get to pornography.
Yeah.
It's shocking.
I can't think of anything else. There are 6.5 billion. What else? What else on
TVs,
this planet?
Shoes.
What else on this planet can you find that much unity around than a smartphone? That's
right.
Really uncanny to me.
Well, the interesting thing about that is, in Revelation 11, it talks about the two witnesses get killed by the Antichrist, and the whole world watches.
Right.
And they all celebrate. And so there had the technology, the whole world has to be able to watch the same thing at the same time for Revelation 11 to happen. We have
It's
the
here.
whole.
Oh, that's easy.
It's here.
The whole world has a smartphone that they can sit there and watch the whole thing at the same time. So that we're living my Tipping Point podcast, and that's at endtimes.com if you're interested in that. But my Tipping Point podcast is about the end times. We're living in the end times. Mm-hmm. These are our unprecedented times.
That's right.
And one of the signs of the end times is just the presence of evil, just the pervasiveness of evil. And we're seeing things today that, it's unbelievable. The things that are happening in small communities, in rural communities, in everyday lives, and the stuff that people can get their hands on. Well, we're going to kind of wind this down, but let me just say, we're talking in this episode about engaging the enemy and overcoming him by the power and the authority that Jesus has given us. He gave us power, but he also gave us authority. He gave us the badge and he gave us the gun. And they're both absolutely necessary if you're going to win the battle in your community. And both of you are making a huge difference in your communities, in the nation, and around the world. So what are your final thoughts on this topic of being aggressive, getting on the offense, and finding the gates of hell in your community?
Well, I would just even echoing kind of some of the things we've been talking about is looking at seeing where is my congregation, where are the battles that they're facing?
Yeah.
And am I equipping them to face those battles? Yeah. And, we talk about wokeism, and even talking about Texas, we're in the panhandle of Texas, probably the most conservative county in Texas. And, I've got a rural community of school district, and they're putting litter boxes in the bathrooms for the Furbies or furries or whatever that is.
Are they actually doing that?
They're actually doing that. Yeah. And so it's everywhere. This battle is everywhere. I've got executives that are being forced to put their pronouns in their signature block.
Yeah.
And they need to know, how do I respond to this? Yeah. As a Christian and as a parent that's trying to raise a family, how do I address those issues? Mm-hmm. And it's critical that as a church, we begin to address those. And sure, this, Pastor, I know you know this, as we start addressing these things, we're going to offend people and they're going to leave. But we've seen the opposite side of that, which is as we righteously and in love address these issues and equip people, we're growing. It people actually causes growth.
Yeah.
That's right. They need help.
Yeah. I think what's really important, and I want to echo what both of you are saying, and why I really believe that this podcast and the information and experience that we share here can be important for leaders, is because there's two kinds of leaders. There's peacetime leaders and wartime leaders.
That's right.
You lead in peacetime, and status quo is fine. Your job is to just manage, keep everybody happy, keep everything happy. But a wartime leader is different. Mm-hmm. Winston Churchill was a wartime leader, right. And he had a different kind of mentality. And if you do not know it right now, we find ourselves in a wartime scenario. Yeah. And it's so important that we are fully aware of that, and that every leader, every pastor embraces that. Yeah. Because if you choose accommodation, if you choose, well, I just want to be at peace with everybody, there's a difference between a peacemaker and a peacekeeper. Yep. A peacekeeper will do it, whatever it takes to keep people happy. You'll avoid conflict. But a peacemaker is willing to go to battle in order to have long-term peace for their kids and for their grandkids and future generations. Mm-hmm. And some of the battles, I know you guys feel this way, that some of the battles we're fighting now, I'm not fighting for me. I'm fighting for future generations. And every pastor in America needs to be willing and be courageous to engage in those battles, not just for us today, but for future generations should the Lord tarry.
And if I could, you mind if I share something there? So, you just struck a memory of when I really felt the Lord shift in me the need to become a wartime pastor. And it was, about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was when I first heard about the Black Robe Regiment. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's the, King George at the time of the American Revolution, King George began to complain about these men in black robes that were stirring everybody up. And it was a lot of the pastors, who would wear the clerical cloaks that would get up and preach about freedom and direction and all of those things. That's a warring culture. That's an aggressive Matthew 16, storm the gates culture. And when I heard about them, I just realized, no, that's what we're doing today. We're fighting for our culture, and we're equipping our people to be able to survive in this culture.
And It doesn't mean being angry.
No.
It doesn't mean yelling and things like that. It means being vigilant and being proactive. I'm on Daystar a lot with Joni Lamb on Table Talk. She talks about every issue, homosexuality, transsexuality, every single thing you can possibly imagine she deals with. And the thing I learned from Joni is you can talk about anything as long as you have compassion.
That's true.
If you're talking about gays or trans or something like that, and you're coming across in a hateful way. See, I believe the way I believe because I love them.
Yeah.
Right.
If I were a confused 13-year-old that thought I was a boy or thought I was a girl or something like that, and then I got my breast mutilated like this little Chloe Cole did, and then decided she was a girl, and now she can't go back, is that for the sake of those kids, for the sake of those confused people, you can't change your sex, but they're confused. So I say for compassion's sake, we have to say something, not because we're angry, not because we're mad. Now I'm mad at the devil.
That's right.
There's only, the Bible says Jesus came to destroy the works of the devil. What he had in mind, and in our communities, we ought to destroy the works of the devil because the devil is the one that is torturing people, that is causing.
Well, it's a spiritual battle we're engaged in.
That's
it's not with flesh and blood.
That's right.
And even though we're not called to be angry at people, we're called to be sober. And we're also called to recognize that we are in a spiritual battle. It's not a battle against flesh and blood, but actually they're not the enemy, they're the captives. And if we don't do our job well, they remain captives for eternity. They're going to be separated from God for all eternity.
That's right.
Hell is a sobering reality.
That's right. Well, Jimmy Witcher, Lee Cummings, my dear friends, they're going to be back with us again next month for this podcast. We're going to be talking about fear. Dealing with fear. This is something in ministry that I had to deal with every single day for many years and overcame it. And this is one of the major ways the enemy comes against leaders and comes against senior pastors and really people in any level, is fear. We're going to be talking about that. Let me say a couple of things. BuiltForWar.com. You can go there. You can subscribe for $15 a month. We have articles that come out every week, my leadership teaching and these men also. But go there. Also, we have an XL Leadership Forum coming up here at our XO Marriage Center, October 10th, 11th, and 12th in Southlake, Texas. And for more information, go to xlleadershipforum.com. Now, we have a very small group coming in that day, less than 100 people. We're cutting it off. So this is going to be very intimate. It's also going to be very interactive. We're going to be teaching. It'll be myself, Pastor Jimmy Witcher, and John Chastain. Lee's out of town. He was invited, but he's too busy. He's too important for us. But Lee will be at the next one after that. But we're going to have these leadership forums on a regular basis. We would love to have you join us. Now, we're going to fill up real quick. So if you're interested in being a part of the XL Leadership Forum, I would love to see you there. So go to xlleadershipforum.com. Thanks for joining us today for Built for War podcast. We'll see you next time. God bless you.